BFF, Brendan,
Franco.
and potentially friends. We don't know. We just made this title up literally
Yeah, we
5 seconds before coming out.
we used to be the BOB show on WFNP The Edge, but we've since transitioned to public access TV. Hooray!
Hooray! So if you're watching this at 2 in the morning, sorry. It's not. Maybe this will be entertaining for you. Maybe it won't be. But we're excited to do this. And the show is going to go all over the place. It's going to cover sports. It's going to cover pop culture. It's going to cover wrestling. I know you can fit wrestling into pop culture, but we're both big fans, so I feel it needs its own separate category when we talk about the show.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it is sports entertainment, so it's a mirroring of the two. It deserves its own category.
So I think for today, we were going to go and talk about NFL news, NFL free agency. I think I think the best place to start is, do you care about free agency? We've talked about this before because sometimes free agency, you get really hyped and excited if it's a player that could really make a big difference. But for the most part, I feel like free agency helps some teams, but I think the expectation and the hype associated with the signing never meets the reality of what actually happens.
I really think it depends on the season and also your team. If you remember a year ago, you as a Raiders fan, like all their big signings they brought in made a pretty big splash, and they didn't. I mean, it worked out well, but I think it just really depends on who you're signing. Like the Giants this year are signing Brandon Marshall. It's a huge signing, and I'm curious how that works out. A lot of the smaller signings, like offensive linemen, I mean, they're splashy signings in some ways, but you never see them play out anyway. So it's one of those hit or miss things. It also depends on how your team is doing.
Well, and then I think to start with the Giants too, and that move with Brandon Marshall, the Giants also just re-signed JPP 4 years, and I think I'm trying to find the actual numbers. I don't know if you saw this earlier, Franco, but quite a lot of money. But I think it makes sense, particularly for that team, because Brandon Marshall was just not happy with the Jets. This gives him Eli way more weapons than possible, but at the same time, while you want to focus on their air game with Odell, with Parker, with Brandon Marshall, their ground game is still terrible. So you have to really balance. That's why I think for me, free agency is like, great, you signed a really great wide receiver, and that's great and all. But if you're not focusing on what really matters, potentially that's going to be a problem long run. A great example for me too is Latavius Murray being signed by what was it, Seattle or Minnesota? Minnesota, right? Minnesota. So as a Raider fan, Latavius was sort of good, but I don't think that he's your answer in Minnesota to replace Adrian Peterson, which by all accounts seems like they're going to cut loose.
No, I think I agree. They're going to release Adrian Peterson for sure. Latavius Murray will be a nice fill-in. Jarek McKinnon wasn't going to get it done. So, I mean, it's a nice pickup. It's kind of exciting, but it's not going to be the same pickup as if they picked up a Marshawn Lynch at retirement, that kind of thing. As far as the Raiders go, since you bounced around everywhere during that diatribe, Dwayne Washington was a fourth-round draft pick last year. I think cutting Latavius Murray shows they have faith in him and Richardson to kind of pick up the slack. So that's a net gain. As far as the Giants go, there is the reality they throw more than any other team in the NFL. So a wide receiver pickup is pretty vital to their roster. And I think their running game is going to be a little better once they have Shane Vereen, and I think they draft the running back in the draft. I wouldn't be surprised if they go after Joe Mixon just because they have a history of picking up players that have a little bit of shady history like Plaxico Burress, JPP with the fireworks. I think they can handle that media blitz, and I think he'll be available late to them.
What do you make of the defending Super Bowl champion Patriots and their free agency moves, signing Dante Hightower and potentially bringing back, why am I blanking on their running back? Who's helped me out here? Who else did they sign?
So the Patriots are really active. They brought in Stephon Gilmore, who is the cornerback from the Bills. He'll be a really nice pickup. He was pretty solid with the Bills, but the defense never really fit him. He'll play well in a Belichick system. They re-signed Dante Hightower, which is a pretty big pickup just because he was the anchor of their defense at linebacker. Especially if you watch Super Bowl. He had that strip sack fumble, which basically turned the tide of the game. So that's a huge pickup. And then they have Brandon Cooks from the Saints they brought in. That's a huge pickup. He's the fastest receiver on the roster since Randy Moss played for them in that very, very historical year where they put up the most TDs ever until Peyton Manning broke it with Demaryius Thomas. So they've really reloaded. And then if you looked at the tight end position, which is a big question mark due to Rob Gronkowski being injured in his back and everything else, he says he's coming back, but the Patriots proactive, and they traded for Dwayne Allen from the Colts, who underperformed with the Colts, but it was an offense that was in flux last year, and given the poor offensive line play, Andrew Luck never had time to find Dwayne Allen. With Tom Brady and with his ability to find short end receivers, Dwayne Allen could have a very Bennett-like season this year, who they let go this year.
What about the Atlanta Falcons? I just was checking in on who they actually signed. It looks like they signed
You got this. They signed Dontari Poe, the defensive tackle. And
I messed that up because I didn't realize there's a video associated with that website.
Oh,
so
you're
I can't really read.
you're totally fine. Yeah, Dontari Poe is a defensive tackle. He'll bolster their defense. I think the biggest issue for them is, are they going to re-sign Taylor Gabriel? Are they going to have a good offense once Shanahan is gone? I mean, they've kind of been muddled for a long time. Matt Ryan underperforming. Shanahan brought out the best of him this year, but is it going to continue next year? And that's really the biggest question.
What about your 49ers? How do you feel about how they're going as a team?
I was not overly thrilled with the signing at first. I really would have preferred to get McDaniels from the Patriots, but Lynch as a GM and Shanahan aren't bad choices. The luster on Shanahan kind of came off when they blew the Super Bowl in the last 15 minutes. But I think it's a move in the right direction. I really like some of the signings. I love Pierre Garçon, and while he's not a wide receiver that really, makes pants drop, that's a filthy reference, but he is a wide receiver that's a really strong player, like in the locker room, and he's a good leader. And given the issues in the locker room in the last couple of years with Harbaugh leaving, he's a solid pickup. I think picking up Marquise Goodwin, who is a 4.2 40-time wide receiver, will open up the on-top routes the way Torrey Smith was supposed to, but didn't because he's not a number one receiver and kind of relied on him like that. But having Garcon and Goodwin as a mix is a really good pickup for us. And then in addition, to help them, we traded for Jeremy Sudoff from the Ravens, who was a Pro Bowl center, and I'm not sure why that happened, but I'm happy we have him.
What do you think about Marshawn Lynch potentially coming back out of retirement to play for the Raiders? Right now, he needs to seek his release, which, according to NFL.com, he is potentially going to do that, even though he's yet to do it right at the moment. But he has to ask for the release from the Seahawks. He has to go to the Raiders if he's interested in that. They have a good offensive line. Is this a weird move for the Raiders? This feels like an old, like bad time Raider move when they were just signing random people. This doesn't seem like a good use of money. This is like maybe not the level of Randy Moss, because Randy Moss actually was a good player, just was on a terrible team. But this is just reeks of old school Al Davis style toward the end of his years moves and just picking up a guy that's got a name.
Yeah, they're going for flash. I don't like the pickup. I feel like they have a really strong running back core with Jalen Richardson and Dwayne Washington. I think they can add somebody late in the draft and have the same effect. I think Lynch wants to come back. I think the year off was what he needed. I just think, kind of like Adrian Peterson last year, he's going to be more susceptible to injury. He's going to, if you remember correctly, the year before last year when he played, he missed 3 games with injury. That's not going to change. He's going to continue to get hurt. He's a downhill runner that's all power. He's not a finesse running back, so he hits a lot of contact. I think they might sign him. I think it might be more like the Arian Foster signing last year with the Dolphins, where he played the first 4 games, got hurt, and then retired.
So you're right, it's more flash, but it then makes me nervous because as a Raiders fan, they were on the track of actually, making solid draft picks, being smart about what they're doing. And now they're like, let's go after this guy that hasn't done anything for a year, who made it very clear he was done. And let's see if he's still got something in the tank, when I'd rather see them focus on their current players and the draft.
I mean, I agree with you, and he didn't really make it clear he was done. He posted an Instagram picture of shoes hanging off a telephone wire. He never actually outright came out and retired. He just went on his retirement tour visiting various African countries because when you're a multimillionaire, I guess that's what you do when you have free time. I think the Raiders will be okay. I think what will happen is they'll go with the Marshawn experiment for the first 4 to 5 games, then they'll figure out they need to do a rotation. I think Marshawn's fine in a Mike all-star role, like running in the short line goal line situations, and then running the other 2 rookies from last year as their main running backs. I just think it's going to take a while for them to transition. And the big question is Derek Carr back from the injury?
Mm-hmm. And who knows? But I want to go and move, and I want to give you stats for a player. And I want to see if you can pick who this player is. One, and I'll give you some hints. He is a starting quarterback and being pursued by a few teams. So here's the stats: only played 5 games last year in the 2016 season.
Okay.
137 attempts, 81 completions, 59% completion percentage, a little over 1,000 yards, with an average of 7 yards per play, 4 touchdowns, fumbled 5 times, a QBR rating of 27.8
Wow.
for those 5 games played. Do you have any idea who this guy is who's been in the league since 2006?
I do.
10-year
I know
career?
exactly who he is. He's Jay Cutler
Who is it?
from
Yeah.
former Chicago Bear, resident jerk of the NFL.
Who might be playing for the New York Jets?
I think the Jets signing's the most likely. And sadly, to be really honest with you, there's a good chance that he's better than Ryan Fitzpatrick. So it's a good move for the Jets, I guess.
It is a very Jetsian move to go after Jay Cutler and to be the one team that will go after Jay Cutler. And I think for me, as a former New Yorker living there, I love this. I want this to happen so badly because I want to just continue to have another year of the Jets being the Jets.
It just reeks of the Jets Brett Favre signing. That 1 year where Favre was not great. That's what it's going to be. And honestly, the NFL...
And that's a great point.
Yeah, the NFL can't survive without Jay Cutler face on the sidelines. Like, he is the most... His face during games. Him and Phillip Rivers are probably the most angry young men on the field ever.
Speaking of Phillip Rivers, and kind of, it's not necessarily free agency per se, but we do have a team moving, and that's the former San Diego Chargers moving to Los Angeles. So that's 2 teams in the last 2 years that have moved over to Los Angeles, and they're playing in the StubHub Arena, I believe it's called, and it is the soccer stadium. So it's about 30,000 seats. I wanted to get your thoughts because, you know, as you are an OG West Coast guy, so you've known San Diego only as the San Diego Chargers and the Chargers only being there. Does this mean to you? What was your reaction when they moved?
I mean, I just liked it. I feel like San Diego has a strong sports history, even though they haven't won a ton there. I mean, the powder blue uniforms, the AFL. I just feel like it really... We already had one LA team, and we already tested that marker with the Rams. I don't know if we needed to add another middling team. And let's be honest, we're not moving like a perennial contender down there. Like back when they had LT and Drew Brees, San Diego was there, but it's not the team that it is. So unless they're able to turn things around and be really successful, I think this move fails. And I think we might be seeing another 5 years a move back to San Diego or a move to London or one of those other places they've talked about moving teams. I just don't like it. And I don't like the idea the Raiders are going to move either because, again, it's a fan base that you've already alienated once. And now you're going to do it again. So I, as a Californian, don't like it, and I think it's a bad move overall.
I'm gearing up for Vegas Raiders, and I love it, and this is why. I think it's going to be entertaining as hell. You have so many things to do in Vegas that you could spend a whole weekend and include the game. I think it's about time, and I think it will probably move the NFL toward an honest conversation about gambling and associating gambling with the NFL because it happens all the time anyway. It's happening now. They pretend like it's not happening. They even have ESPN skirt around the issue when they have their analysts, don't discuss the lines for the game, but everybody knows what the lines are because sports talk radio continues to do that.
Yeah.
And even their own higher end and upper echelon anchors will discuss the lines and sort of a wink and a nod like Al Michaels does during NFL broadcasts where even if it's a garbage time play, it'll say something like, well, at least the guys in Vegas are going to be happy. So it's kind of ridiculous that they refuse to acknowledge the gambling associated with their own sport when you have in Europe soccer stadiums that have embraced and soccer teams that have embraced it and actually have kiosks there in their stadiums to place bets. So if you move a team to Vegas, and I want to get your opinion on this, but I think you are opening the door wide open to have a discussion about gambling and the NFL and making it a legitimate experience as opposed to what it is now where you can only do it in certain places or illegally if it's not legal in your state.
I agree. I think the move to Las Vegas is fine. I think it will open the door to gambling eventually. I think it's going to be a very, very slow road. As we've kind of learned from like baseball and everything else, gambling's like the great American no-go. And one thing you're forgetting too is that at soccer stadiums, they're in places where you can gamble legally. Most of the U.S. doesn't allow that for that. So unless you start moving every stadium onto a reservation or you're moving every team to Las Vegas, I don't think you'll see the perpetuation of kiosks in stadiums. I would be totally fine with the move to Las Vegas if it was a team that had no history. Like, take the Jaguars. No one cares about that. But don't take the Raiders, who already moved from Oakland once to LA then back. It just seems like a team that's in flux, and I think you're alienating a fan base. But I think you're right. Vegas is an easy enough destination. The Oakland airport flies directly there. I think a lot of fans will wash over with it. It'll be a fine thing, and they'll do great. I just, as a native Californian, especially Northern California, I'm not thrilled to lose a team that is so invested in, so, like, part of the city of Oakland.
I think the last thing to wrap up our NFL free agency, again, it's not a real free agency just topic, but I think it speaks volumes about sort of arrogance with new stadiums being built. In Minnesota, the new Minnesota Vikings stadium has a problem with birds dying constantly. I don't know if you've read this article or not.
I have.
So they built a beautiful glass stadium, and one of their walls is all glass, and birds keep dying because they didn't make the proper adjustments to tell birds that it's not air and they can't go through it. So they ram it, they die, and it's a controversial thing in Minnesota because there's these animal rights activists that are very upset. But why, if it's $1 million project? Like, I used to work at a place, we did a renovation, we did an expansion. But that was the first thing we put on. We put little wavy decals so that birds don't ram into it. Why do you think this is such a problem with the NFL in terms of this? This just reminds me of other, like, terrible moves, especially, again, free agency moves in terms of San Diego moving, Raiders going to Vegas. It's just there's all these haphazard changes and rules that they make, and it just makes me laugh with the birds. I feel terrible for the birds, but it's like, this is I wouldn't expect anything less from a team that's designing a new stadium, particularly led by the NFL. Of course, they weren't paying attention to the birds.
It's incredibly short-sighted, and it's one of those things like where there's so much that goes into building a stadium, especially in Minnesota, from climate control to the freezing temperature of the glass and heating the field and all those other things. I think it kind of got washed away. I think it is kind of funny that they angled the window in a way that it was facing the migration patterns. And that's really unfortunate. And they probably should have kind of looked at the EPA and asked that question. But as we've learned in our country recently, the Environmental Protection Agency and anything involving conservation is not nearly as popular as it used to be. So that might be a trend as part of that. In addition, it's not the first time a stadium's killed birds. Boise State's Blue Field has killed a number of birds. So it's happening. It happens. I think what they'll end up doing is doing a decal and trying to find a way to not block the light, but also kind of give them a sign. I think they need to fix it, though, because we live in a world where protests are a real thing and are quite mobilizing. And this is something that maybe won't get a huge response. We'll get enough of a response to slow down the transition into the stadium.
Any final thoughts, or what are you looking forward to next week, and what's, in your opinion, the last big NFL free agency signing? Is it the Jay Cutler, maybe? Or are we going to see something? We're not really going to see too much because the draft is coming soon.
I think we won't see too much movement with the draft coming. The biggest thing I think we will see coming up here is Malcolm Butler, and whether or not he's traded for the Saints or he's signed by the Patriots, re-signed. And here's what's going to happen, kind of. The Saints won't outright sign him, because if they outright sign him in a restricted free agent tender, they lose their top 10 pick. Now, if they trade him, they can trade for their late pick, the 32nd pick in the draft, which they received from the Patriots for Brandon Cooks. So if they can trade him, I think they'll do the move. I don't think they're going to sign him. And I think if the trade doesn't happen, the Patriots will re-sign him to a 1-year prove-it contract because they had enough cap room for it.
I just bought NFL Madden 17. So, do you have that? I'd like to play that with you and see if we can do free agency trades.
I do have NFL Madden 17, actually, and I can download the newest roster and we can play that way.
Yes! All right, that was more just for me personally. All right, so we're about wrapping up the first episode. If I had to give myself a free agency grade, I'd give myself a B- because I hit a website that played audio in the middle of our conversation, and I deeply apologize to you, Franco.
It's fine. If I had to give myself a grade, I'd say a C plus. And then at some point, somebody's air conditioning kicked on, probably yours. So that was fun. So listeners,
My
if you
window
hear-
here is open, so
Oh.
that was somebody's car.
All right. Well, don't panic, listeners.
We're
and
not
viewers.
professionals. It's public access. Get off us, man. Come on.
All right.
All right,
well,
that's it for the first episode of BFF, Brendan, Franco, and Friends. I'm Brendan,
I'm Franco.
and we'll see you next week.